flowering leaves of all these life-giving trees that flow in the breeze, giving us the air to breathe, came from the seeds that sons and daughters had sown, passing down histories through stories, genes, and bones. Hear the whispers of the past, dictate your prologue, a generational griot through which memories are prolonged. So we reach down like nourishing waters to seek truths, except we receive nourishment when we're digging the roots.
Hello, and welcome to the 29th episode of BlackProGen Live. We are so excited that you all could join us tonight. We've got an amazing set of circumstances and things and stories and record sets and all sorts of stuff to talk about tonight, and we are really excited that everybody is here, is joining us for tonight's show, and we can't wait to get to episode 30, but we're at 29 right now, so we're going to celebrate the topic and the subject matter for episode 29. Before we get started, we got to remind you, please don't forget to join the conversation when it comes to this episode and any other time, anything that you feel is relevant to BlackProGen Live. How can you do that? You can join us by tweeting us at BlackProGen. You can also hashtag your comments on Twitter or on social media with BlackProGen. Also, something new that we just discovered is that if you actually watch the episode using the YouTube app, you can actually participate in the live chat. So you don't actually have to be on a computer anymore. You can actually chat live using your mobile device, but it's only through the YouTube app. So we've got chatters there available. We see you guys all out there in the chat room, and thank you so much for joining us there. If you're watching live on a computer, the chat is to the right at the top of the page, so you can join the live chat there. You can also, as I just mentioned, look at the chat on a mobile device. It'll pop up at the bottom of the page. You'll see join the live chat there as well. So what are we going to talk about this evening? Tonight's subject matter is people of color in the West. From the perspective of Arizona, California, and Nevada, we have a chock full show. We've got a lot of content to get to tonight, and I'm excited about this because I'm a native Californian, so these are my stomping grounds. In the next few weeks, James and Teresa will be in their stomping grounds in the Northeast, but this is definitely my native area here, so we're excited to share the content with you. Before we move on, I just have to remind everybody, don't forget to tune in and subscribe to the laydown. Get the lowdown. Sorry, I said the laydown. Get the latest and greatest from BlackProGen in your inbox. Subscribe to the lowdown today. Check the description of the recording of this video and any BlackProGen Live episode for the link. And what the lowdown is any blogs, podcasts, radio shows that we do, it all gets sent out directly to your email inbox. So then that way you don't have to go to all of our separate websites to check out our new content. Also, before we move on, just want to remind you, we've got several other episodes for BlackProGen. As I mentioned, tonight is the 29th episode. And of course, all these topics that you see on the screen relate to what we're talking about, to areas that people, that they migrated to California from. That would be Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi. We also have shows about microfilm. We've got our most actually watched episode is our reactions to the Henry Louis Gates show, Finding Your Roots. And before I move on, I would like to go ahead and introduce our illustrious panel. So let me stop presenting. And let's go with Shelly. You got to unmute yourself, Shelly.
Greetings from Central Virginia, everybody.
All right.
Move along.
That's family tree, girl. She was like, usher us on in. All right.
Let's get through it.
We'll hit Maryland next. We'll go with Bernice.
Hello, everyone. Bernice Bennett from Maryland.
From Maryland. All right. All right. We'll hit the other Marylandite who just joined us in view on her screen, the other lady in red, or perhaps maybe fuchsia, Angela Walton Raji.
Good evening, everyone. Coming to you from Baltimore County here in Maryland as well.
All right. We've got the last Marylander with the hoodie, James Morgan III.
I live in Maryland. I'm from New Jersey.
All
Good
right.
evening, everybody. My name is James Morgan III, and I do reside in PG County, Maryland, right outside the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. I'm always happy to be here, and I'm so excited my mother's DNA test came back in yesterday.
All
Just
right.
energized my whole week.
Yeah, James has been waiting for a while to get his mom's results back, and he had sort of like a false flag that came out.
Yeah.
Made him think the results were in, but they weren't.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see.
It turns out my mommy's from Benin. That's what it turns out.
Oh boy! All right, youngest of the crew, all the way out in Cali, throwing up the W in Oakland. Alex.
Myself. Hi, everybody, coming from Oakland, California. It's good to be back on this panel for a second time. Let's get this night going.
All right, and he can actually talk from the beginning. We don't have to read his lips or like read his transcripts. That's the best part. All right, last but not oh no, sorry, I forgot. Let's go to the other coast with our buddy who is just tried and true, and she fought through brick walls to get in here tonight, Ellen Fernandez-Sacco.
Hey everybody, coming from Central Florida, Hillsborough County. I'm excited to be here tonight with all of you.
All right, and last but not least, we've got our Tuskegean.
It's me, True. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to see you all out there in the chat room and on Twitter and Facebook and wherever you're tuning in from. I'm here in Kentucky, and I'm just glad to be here and see you all so we can talk about going out west.
Going out west. All right. Resident troublemaker, host, and everything in between. Nika Smith here in sort of sunny. Well, we had schizophrenic weather today. It was a little crazy. It was like 90, and then after like 5 o'clock, it was like 60 degrees. So when my husband went to go get dinner for us, he was in basketball shorts and he was freezing. So yeah, weather is crazy, but thanks so much for joining us. Of course, we have to get to one of our most cherished parts of the show before we actually get into the content. I see all the chatters there. Keep holding it down in Missouri. We've got our regulars here, Karen Royal, Denise Muhammad. Thanks you guys for joining us as you have every single week. This year, we absolutely love that. Anybody want to guess what our top 10 is for this episode?
Something to do with gold.
Top 10
Desert.
Top 10 records from Death Row Records. Top 10 songs
I
from
didn't
Death Row
even
Records.
think about that, and
That's
I totally
a good
could have. That
one.
would have been a great one. I could have sang "Baby, Let Me Toss It Up." I could have did that. But I know Miss Angela would have been like, "What are you talking about? I don't understand." We would have had to do a whole debrief afterwards. She would have been like, "No."
Yeah,
I mean, some E40, nothing?
We'll get her there. I know what Death Row Records is.
That's right. Don't ever assume that the elders don't know what Death Row Records is.
True.
But topic for tonight, 10 products of Arizona, California, and Nevada and the Great Migration. And you're probably wondering, what could those be? Products? Are we talking about exports? Are we talking about whatever? We're actually talking about people. And some of these might be a surprise to you. Some of them maybe not. Cesar Chavez, labor leader, civil rights activist, born in Arizona. Mayor Tom Bradley, first Black mayor of Los Angeles. He was born in Texas, but raised in Arizona. Janice Mirikatani. Alex should know who this is if he doesn't. This is a great education for him. She's actually married to Pastor Cecil of Glide Memorial, which is a huge philanthropic church in San Francisco. They feed thousands of people. They're just amazing. She's a poet and activist. Of course, she was born in California. Of course, we have to bring up Snoop Dogg. We talked about Death Row. Snoop Dogg's family is from Macomb, Mississippi, but he was born in California. DeMarco Murray, who is an NFL player, was born in Nevada. I actually had a hard time finding people born in Nevada that were notable. Maybe because it's like it's more of a younger, I guess you would say, state. Moving forward. Of course, we've got to do Dolores Huerta. She was born in New Mexico, but raised in California. Pete Escovedo, you know, I have an Oakland slant. Pete Escovedo went to McClimon's High School, which was one of my former school sites. Of course, everyone knows, or maybe they don't know, his daughter being Sheila Escovedo. They were all from Oakland, and he was actually born in Pittsburgh, California, but he resides, and his kids were born in Oakland. Vanessa Hudgens. Folks may be wondering, why in the world is Vanessa Hudgens from High School Musical on this list if we're talking about people of color? Vanessa Hudgens' mother is Filipino. A lot of people do not know that. She was born in California. Erica Alexander, who was on the show Living Single. If you just saw the movie Get Out, she was actually the police officer in the movie Get Out. She was born in Arizona. And last but not least, Jordan Sparks, who was a singer and an actress. She was also born in Arizona. So these are our 10 products of Arizona, California, and the Great Migration. Anybody else you all want to throw in there? Yes. Oh, and Jordan, of course. Jordan won American Idol. How could I forget to mention that? She was also in Sparkle, last movie that Whitney Houston was in. She was dating, oh gosh, who was she dating? I can't think of that kid's name. He was a rapper. Space on his name. He's a cute guy, but I can't think of his name. Anything else you want to throw in about notable facts before we get into the content? The chat room is cracking off. Everybody saying hello.
One person I'd like to throw in, and actually I'm surprised, I thought you would include, was Huey P. Newton. Actually came from Louisiana originally, and then made his fame, so to speak, out in the West Coast in California.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I could have thrown him in, but you wouldn't have anybody to add. I was trying to throw sort of obscure folks out there. Anyone else? Anybody want to add? Who else do you know are products of the Great Migration that ended up in Arizona, California, or Nevada? Wine.
Well, I know Charles Manson lived in California, but I can't remember if he was born there. I think he was raised in California. And he was born in Ohio, but Atwater, California. His mom and them were out there.
Okay.
We don't claim him.
Yeah, we usually don't claim him.
Jesse Owens.
You asked that, you know, he was right next to where I lived, so his family was.
True.
That's
okay.
how I know that.
Angela brought up Jesse Owens. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a lot of talent, a lot of smarts, a lot of different things that wouldn't have been, you know, what they were if they had stayed, perhaps if they had stayed in the locations that they were. So let's jump into the content for tonight. Here's the first question. Do you have any ancestors that headed out west or that became to be out west, being Arizona, California, Nevada? Let's dive in. Do you have any ancestry there?
All my Basses went west.
Why?
Who knows? Before I was born, they had to get out. They were from Arkansas. What do you mean? Why?
Well, I mean, we have to have this discussion because a lot of folks, yeah, you know, why did, you know, let's talk about why they had to go.
Well, I know my great grandparents and my grandmother and her siblings, they actually moved to California, and this is something I actually had forgotten about, and I wouldn't have remembered had I not spoke to Nika the other day on the phone. They went out there for maybe 2 or 3 years. My great grandfather was having a really hard time finding work in Alabama at that time, and he went out there trying to make a way. And truth be told, we would have been a West Coast family, but it wasn't any better for him. So they just ended up going back to Alabama, you know. So I do have some West Coast roots, I guess you could say, but they didn't stay put. They didn't stay there.
Yeah, my aunt and uncle left Michigan and went there in I want to say I was about 10 years old, so it's about 62. They were there when the Watts riots and all that stuff was going on, so it might have been earlier. But they went to LA and then ended up doing probably 30, 40 years in Stockton, and now they're down in Florida.
Yeah, my uncles,
you know.
Yeah, my uncles left New Orleans in the 40s and moved to San Francisco, and they were carpenters and did a lot of brickwork there. So they went for work. They had great job opportunities there.
Now,
Awesome.
there was an African American migration to Utah too in the early 1900s. I watched, I think it was the Oggs chapter several years ago, did a little documentary on that migration and the early settlers of blacks, and I believe they became Mormon.
Good. Well, my family story is sort of like a third stop after the Great Migration. My on my dad's side, actually, my grandfather and my grandmother left Chicago right before the Watts riots. It's why did everybody leave like right before then, and then they ended up experiencing that. I don't quite know why, but they left Chicago for California, which is how I became a Californian. My parents followed. A lot of folks are descendants of folks that participated in the Great Migration. We talked a little bit about the reasons why they would have left. You know, we have those in the middle of the night having to leave because you don't want your employer finding out that you're not there or that you're not going to return for work. There's a number of different aspects. Let's talk about, anyone have anybody that was like a Pullman porter or in those type of vocations? That's probably one of the first, especially for African Americans, that was one of the first jobs that they could get where they, it brought them out west. Alex, you want to talk about that?
So I'm a product of the Great Migration, very proud of it. My mother and father were both raised here in California. My mom was born in a little place called Owasso, Alabama. However, her mother had moved to LA to go to UCLA, where she was one of the first Black women to be educated there. And she and my grandfather moved up to San Francisco, where my mother was raised. On my father's side, my grandparents, my actual great-grandparents moved to California from New Orleans and a little place called Tallulah, Louisiana, where they came to Mare Island to work on the docks at that time. But on my mother's side also, my great-grandfather, Ernest Talmore, came from Detroit, where he worked as a Pullman porter, to Oakland and retired and died here in Oakland. I was raised in Sacramento, but now I'm in Oakland, so I'm kind of doing the reverse migration because I've also spent the last 2 years on and off in Louisiana as well. So
That's a great story, actually. So what did you make the connection that your ancestors came out during the war, during World War II, in terms of like their work? Like what happened when you kind of unearthed that story?
So I have a little bit of oral history and then also just kind of piecing it together. Coming out of my great-grandfather, Warren Williams, was born in 1919, so he was like just missed the draft for World War II. And at any rate, because he had just missed the draft, he was able to get all of this work that was left behind in New Orleans. But as soon as all the soldiers came home, he was pretty much, without a job. So he left New Orleans to look for work out here. And it was a completely different world. World War II changed, our whole layout of our nation. So by that time, there was already a growing Black population here, and things were a little more tolerant. So that was one of their driving forces to come out this way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we're talking about, we touched on California. Does anybody have anyone that went out to Arizona or Nevada in their families?
Yep. Another clan of my Basses.
it's just
They're the only relatives I have. So what can I say?
Angela's writing is Bass for everything.
Bass.
Anyone else have any? Where did they head to? Las Vegas, Reno?
Las Vegas, Reno, Phoenix. That's about it.
Yeah,
You're still there.
I have a line of my Gordon relatives. My third great uncle Wilson Gordon. He actually left Alabama, went to Detroit, Michigan, and then his family line ended up in Vegas, actually, or in the Vegas greater Vegas area, actually.
Okay. I have people out there now, but it wasn't. It was in the 70s that they went out there. They're in Nevada, in Vegas.
Which that still counts. That still counts because
Sure,
the end of the Great Migration date is sort of fluid.
Yeah.
You have the people that like were at the very, very tail end, which I really kind of consider like maybe 75 to 79, like the real official end. But
That's right.
which is late. Yeah, which is totally late. It's way after everyone else. Anybody have any relatives? So we talked about a couple folks at Arizona. Nevada, most of my family, in fact, it's hilarious. I remember before my parents moved to California, my mom talked about a relative of ours that moved to Las Vegas, like, as everyone was like migrating there. And she swears to death that they had no roof on their house, like literally no roof on their house. And she said that back then, these dust storms would come.
Oh, yeah,
And you would be in the house and the dust storm would kick up, and and they had like some sort of a tarp over, and I was like, Mom, how were they like legally able to live in this house without a roof?
Was that a sod house?
I don't know. But she
That's
says they
probably
had
a
no
sod
roof.
house. What year was it?
This was early 70s. This was before my sister was born. So
Oh
this
no,
was
the
early
sod
70s.
houses
Exactly.
were before then.
Okay.
They were
Okay.
outside.
Yeah, basically that's why I
They
couldn't
were
understand why
outside.
it was a house. But she swore it had 4 walls. It just didn't have
Had
a
some
roof.
sound issues.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe they just weren't done with it. But either way, that's how my family kind of ended up in Nevada. But a lot of them went back to where they were, or actually eventually came to California. So let's talk about crucial record sets when it comes to Arizona, California, and Nevada research for people of color. What are our top places that we're looking? Of course, we have our ancestry record sets. To me, in some ways, I feel like, when I find out somebody's from California, it's almost a jackpot, because you've got, the California Birth Index, which has probably, the highest number of births in the country, or in a birth index, or if not, it's very close. I want to say it's like 5 million people are in that birth index. I'm in there. Alex is in there. And then you've got marriages, several marriage databases between Family Search and Ancestry that go for various years. I know that you can get the actual certificates on Family Search. They have a database for that, but that's pretty early on, or earlier on, so to speak, for like living people, going to like the 50s, I want to say. And then you've got Divorce Index for the state of California. You've got Death Index for the state of California. So those 4 things. And those all kind of tie in, especially when you're talking about sort of like cross-pollination with records, because a lot of people in California got married in Las Vegas and Reno. So you'll find a lot of marriage records, where it says the person, was a resident of, or it says resident state California, on those Nevada marriage records. Arizona, I'm just throwing out the record sets that I deal with. The state archives has actually got death certificates on their website that you can download for free 99. So I would definitely look up the state archives, of course. I'm just talking vital records here. Any other crucial records that you all can think about when it comes to Arizona, California, Nevada that I just left out?
I wouldn't forget the universities as a resource to view some records and look at those type of repositories, because a lot of the universities have those special collections and things like that. So I think it's always a good resource to check.
Ellen, you want to weigh in?
Besides,
Yeah, I think too, because when you're dealing with people of color, a lot of the state histories, they don't really include those. And when I went through some of the archival materials, for instance, for Nevada, they didn't really have anything subdivided for people of color. It was really, and it didn't really speak to even some of the founding populations, which are Native American. Can you hear me okay? In Nevada as well. So, so definitely the universities are a place to look. And I think that's part of the civil rights movement and part of the whole push to have ethnic studies department developed so that this history would be recorded and would be, transmitted to others. So you'll find collections of oral histories, for instance, at University of Arizona, or other experiences that you really don't see reflected in the state archives, especially if you go through MARIAH, which has a lot of really great collections. But there's a way you can go into some of the other collections outside that website. But there are definitely a lot of gaps and a lot of things for people to think about in terms of getting that oral history for your family, so you know that they track through those states, so you'll be able to find those record sets as well.
This is kind of a different conversation, different episode. I'm not trying to be funny, I swear. But a lot of times I would actually, for like more recent stuff, like in the 50s, when you start getting to like that civil rights, Black Power era, Ellen, you gave me the idea to check the COINTEL profiles. If you have parents or grandparents that may have been involved with like the Black Panthers or some of those more like ethnic nationalists, you start talking about the Young Lords and the Weather Underground, you'd be surprised that you might find, your grandparent or uncle or aunt, somebody might show up in one of J. Edgar Hoover's FBI files somewhere. And I know when it comes to like the Nation of Islam and the Black Muslims, that was kind of like I don't want to say it was just the East Coast thing, but I know that there was a lot of data on that in the East Coast, so I've dealt with that. But I'd imagine that you probably would find a lot of that kind of stuff, similar type of surveillance type of records through Freedom of Information Act. If you have anybody who may have been involved with the Panthers or similar type of organizations. So, and a lot of folks don't think about that, but Ellen actually gave me the idea, what you just said. Yeah.
James, do you have any resources that you can recommend for people? I have a cousin who was very active in the movement. She traveled with Angela when Angela was on the run with Angela Davis, and she's always said, "Oh, I know they have files on me," but where would one go to find that information?
Well, I know about a lot of that because I'm quite sure they're keeping a file on me somewhere. I'm quite sure of that. But I'm not just like your cousin. But aside from that, FBI. I know you can get a lot of that right straight off FBI.gov. A lot of it probably will be redacted. But if you go in there and just search on FBI.gov or contact a local bureau office, or even if you write a formal letter and just invoke the Freedom of Information Act, they even have like a how-to guide step by step. And I can't remember what the year is, but it is a certain amount of years that a record has to be before it can be declassified, so to speak. But when you start that's why a lot of that stuff from the Panthers and that whole era is starting to come out now, because now it's getting into that expired time period.
I would also suggest, if you have a state if your cousins or family members were from a state that had a sovereignty commission, even if they weren't from that particular state, search the states that have records online to see if their names were mentioned. Because some of those organizations lasted well throughout the 60s, almost until the 70s. And I know Mississippi is the only one that actually still has records like available and searchable online by name. They had to be sued in order for that to be put online and digitized. So I would potentially even look there. And even sometimes with the Mississippi Sovereignty Commission, just search for the county or location that your family may have been from. And because they tracked everybody. I have family members that weren't even of age that they were tracking in high school, that they have records on. So I would definitely look there as well.
Also, don't forget the newspapers. You have Chronicling America, you have Genealogy Bank, and there are other newspapers that you can check. But certainly, if your ancestors had any activity that may warrant a newspaper article, search there, because you will find stuff, especially during the migration period, where you would have stories of people leaving one location and entering another location. They might even end up in the little society page of such and such a group of family members will come in to visit. So I think that people need to think about that when they're looking at what's happening out west with their relatives.
Right, I would agree with you too, because it's really interesting. California cities keep great newspaper records, and even if you're looking for someone a branch of your family that's moved out west, say you're tracking down a descendant so far removed, you can find an obituary here and do that online, and that's been one of my greatest resources in my research as well, all over the state, really.
On that note, I'd like to say one of my personal favorite West Coast newspapers that I've dug in for research is the Pacific Appeal. I think that newspaper was awesome, just personally.
Where's it from? Is that from San Francisco area, the Bay Area? Where's that paper from, James?
I'm sorry, I muted my darn
Alex, did you know, or James? Where is that paper from?
I'm looking. Hold on, I'm looking. It's it's San Francisco.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I immediately, when this topic came up, I actually was going back a little further and was looking back at, did California have any role with like the Civil War? And because we usually think only of the Civil War or the impacts of the South, you know, or the North and the South on the East Coast side or mid, you know,
The Western theater,
states.
the Western theater of the Civil War would be considered, of course, those trans-Mississippi Western states, Arkansas, Louisiana Indian Territory, Missouri, and Texas. There was a little bit. However, there was sympathy. There were both northern and southern sympathies in various communities farther west, but those were territories. Those were not states. Those were not
Correct.
places that seceded. Even Indian Territory never seceded, but the tribes, the 5 slaveholding tribes, signed an alliance with the Confederacy and fought for the South. And there were battles there, but there were, to my knowledge, no battles that went beyond Texas further west, as far as the Western theater of the Civil War. I've yet to see references to it.
Yeah, I wasn't meaning battles out there, but there was migrations of the Southern slaveholders that took their slaves to California and things like that. And then there was issues there. Yeah, definitely not the battles or anything.
There was even a migration to Brazil. Slaveholders, yes.
Well, also to Liberia. You had Confederate troops that went to Liberia right after the war and settled over there. Yes, it was on one of the documentaries that we watched. But coming back on the California, it was interesting to read up on some of that because, and again, we usually don't include, like you said, because there's no battles or anything, that we don't assume California's role. But, you know, that gold rush and stuff that was happening was dragging a lot of your deep South Southern plantation owners, you know, out trail, and they would bring their slaves with them. And I think from some of the reading I had, there was definitely a conflict on that time because you had the people that didn't believe in, you know, slavery or against slavery, and then you have these Southerners coming with their slaves. So it was quite interesting.
I agree, and that we'll actually talk about that a little bit later. I have a few slides that I was going to share with some additional information regarding different people of color populations in these 3 states. So, kind of akin to that, have you, before you all became researchers, did you have any information or did you know anything about the nature of slavery in the state of California? Had you ever heard of it?
Had heard of what?
Slavery in California, the nature of slavery in California.
Nika, there was no slavery in California. What are you talking about?
I just told you. I just explained to you.
You did explain, but I'm
he
saying
wasn't listening.
I mean, the California mission system is a system of slavery also.
The key word is facetious.
Well, yes, but can you continue, Ellen, on what you were expounding upon before he interrupted you?
I mean, this is an earlier period, but there is slavery through the system of missions.
The missions, yes.
You know, and
even though Felipe Rosera is, you know, revered, it's kind of questionable.
Yeah,
and some things that happen.
We got
a lot of Native peoples are still fighting for recognition about that, you know.
So can you expound upon that some? Because you know we've got to deal with this is pre-statehood, correct?
But this is, you have like 21, I believe it was 21 sites going up along the path that goes through California, and in each one of those they established these missions. But who built it? Who was the labor for that? That was all the local Native people. And they locked them up at night. They were, you know, sexually abused. They were physically abused. It was not a happy scene at all. And there's a friend of mine, Deborah Miranda. She's written to this because she's Ohlone and Esalen, and tracing her ancestry, and also it goes back to these scenarios during the mission system, which falls apart. I think I forget the year right now, where the Mexican government wants the land and kind of puts an end to the system, and that's before the United States takes over you know, or starts putting claims on parts of California. So there is a familiarity there, and you know,
Yes.
but by the time the southern slaveholders hold up, it's not like it's a rare thing.
Wow.
There's kind of already a preliminary history to that.
Let's
Right.
see. Yeah, Ellen, you went a little space age towards the
Oh, did I? Like,
yeah, I don't know quite know what happened, but like don't jiggle your cord. Don't jiggle your
okay,
cord. Whatever you do, don't jiggle your cord. Yeah, there's definitely is something to be said about that. You know, California came in as a free state. Shelley talked about this. Slaveholders from southern western states mostly brought their slaves into California. And when the laws were established, there were not supposed to be slavery in California. Some of those slaveholders did not tell their who were supposed to be their former slaves that they were now free. They deliberately did not say anything to them about it. And I'm actually going to get to some slides in a second where I'm going to share the story of one of them. People are actually talking about it in the chat room because she's a fairly well-known person when it comes to that. And some other records that are being brought up that are definitely, you know, gold mines when it comes to California and these other areas, Arizona and Nevada, definitely voter registration lists. You got to remember that people had a right to vote much earlier in California than they did, or in some of these Western states than they did in other places. I know that my grandmother's brother was a registered voter. Several other family members were registered voters in the 40s and were voting in California. You know, that's 20 plus years, you know, really before people in African Americans or people of color in southern states. So that is definitely a great resource. California's voter registrations are on Ancestry. We also talk about exactly. We're talking about Asian records here as well. You've got the Japanese internment records that are at the National Archives. If you need more detailed stuff, you actually have to write to the National Archives in DC to get those records available. One of our Genia buds, Linda Okazaki, who will be joining us for our Getting Started in Asian Pacific Islander genealogy research, is definitely somebody who's got experience with working with those internment camp records. And so does Bernice, because Bernice has been helping Linda with pulling those records. We're definitely going to talk about Ellen's pinging in. I've got stuff on that too, what she's talking about. So that's a conversation piece. Trying to think if I've covered everything. Oh, yes, homestead records, definitely valuable. You got to talk about those as well. Those would be available. Those are land patents, correct? Right? So those would be on the Bureau of Land Management website when it comes to Western states. Alex, what were you going to throw in before I get to the slides?
With Black slavery in California, many people who were brought here as slaves, in many cases, they were assigned a similar deal like sharecropping, where gold mining was a big deal here. Plenty of Black families were brought here under the same kind of enslavement, and that existed for many years. Where I grew up in Sacramento, I want to say about 10, 13 miles outside, was a place called Negro Bar, where Black people actually were buried, hung, and pretty much enslaved well into like 1910. So, you know, when we disregard the nature of slavery here in California, oftentimes we're forgetting that there was an earlier great migration of Black people to the West, just as there was a migration of Black people to what's the U.S. now via the slave trade. So we have to include that also.
Why do you all feel like the nature of, or just the experiences of people of color out in the West, they get sort of, you know what I mean? Like they don't really get talked about that often. Is it?
I
one
think
thing
it
I would say is
connects with
that
the battles. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say one thing I think, and I learned this actually about myself at my brother's graduation at Stanford last year, is that because the West Coast was is considered new by American standards when you compare it to like places like Boston and Philadelphia, it's not, you know, a lot of times when people deal with history, we don't consider the things that are closer to our own times as being particularly great or particularly important, but of course they are. You know, what makes a political movement in the 1700s any more important than a political movement in the 1970s? Really nothing. But to a lot of people's minds, and even I've fallen into that trap sometimes, you know, we think just because something is older makes it more important. And that's only true with siblings. But other than that, everything else is all equal.
Well, wasn't Arizona pretty much like a Confederate state, though? You know, back during the Civil War time. I mean, I know it wasn't official to about, you know, the beginning of the war, but for some reason, I think in Arizona, I'm going to look it up.
All right, look it up. What were you going to add, Ellen?
No, it's a
Yes,
history
they
of
were
segregation.
considered a Confederate state. What'd you say, Ellen?
Segregation, the laws, segregation laws and stuff. And that already will set, you know, certain populations in terms of the value of their narratives below that of a, you know, a dominant narrative, a dominant white narrative, which you find with a lot of states.
Now, when they say Confederate Arizona, are they thinking the same way that I think of Confederate states, you know, in the South? And because they're saying Confederate Arizona was a territory claimed by the Confederate States during the American Civil War between 1861 and 65.
Yeah.
They seceded from New Mexico territory. So I guess it's viewed, you know, it overlapped. It later became a Union government in 63. So for a couple years, it looks like they were Confederate. That's very interesting.
It's also very telling considering the political climate there now.
Yes, yes, yes.
And then some of the history between Northern and Southern California, the differences there, you know, that are
yes.
those borders.
To go back to your question, Nika, like when you say why is the view on places like the West, like as far as racial conditions here differ, I think it's because predominantly people left the South to move here with this umbrella term of, you know, better opportunities, less racial prejudice, so on and so forth. But the actual reality is that nowhere in this country was that purely escapable. Oakland is a city throughout the whole nation with the most redlining to this day. Places like, and you're from Oakland, so I know you know this, but you know, West Oakland, East Oakland, made solely for the purpose of redlining. You know what I mean? So when we think about that, even Sacramento, as you know, progressive as it tries to look, is still completely redlined in many ways and regards. So when we think about that, look at the Bayview in San Francisco. It's the same thing, but because there's this idea that people were moving to somewhere better, we didn't, you know, experience all that stuff. We're still experiencing that stuff now. Why do you think that the Panthers could be formed here in Oakland, right? So,
well, let's talk about redlining, because we can't act as though everyone who's watching is familiar with what that process was and the whole construct behind redlining. Ellen, can you weigh in on that for a little bit, just to give a, you know, sort of like a brief overview, bird's eye view on redlining and how that's affected the communities that migrated out to Arizona, California, and Nevada?
I think they're tied to the, I don't know if it's exactly the Sanborn maps, but the maps of different communities. And then they would be color coded for different purposes in terms of their quote unquote preference, you know, the more desirable sections of town. So then you visually, you'd look at the map, people could look at the map and say, I don't want to be in this neighborhood, we don't have to be in this neighborhood. And then they back it up with local laws and statutes that would actually spell out who could not buy a home or live in certain neighborhoods. You know? And that's what Alex is talking about with Oakland, and we see that with Los Angeles, we see just about every American city, really, if you go back.
And it still happens today.
Exactly.
I mean, if we trace the history of the term, there goes the neighborhood, that's what we're, you know, that's what we're talking about. Literally, it had to do with the banks denying, especially after World War II, denying soldiers that were returning from the war, you know, their GI Bills and so on and so forth. So you get things like the ghettos and all these different neighborhoods being created. And we have it going on just recently, and since we're still talking about the West, in Placerville, and then in El Dorado Hills, which is technically in Sacramento County. They, in 2014, I think it was, they found, there was a couple that bought a house there, and they found in the deed of their house, which is an old house, that there was a statute in there saying no Mexicans, no Chinese, and no Negroes. And this is like the statute was from the 50s or something. So if that was still in play in 2014, imagine how that affects a population of people.
It seems like it's so ingrained that people just forgot that the statute was even there at some point, and no one even thought to change it. You know, and restrictive covenants have, you know, for years have not been, you know, able to be validated or considered law for a long time. But, you know, it just kind of goes back to what we're talking about. So how would redlining, in the context of which we're talking about it, how would that inform your genealogy searches? Because there is a benefit of, despite the fact that these communities were marginalized, that people couldn't buy houses where they wanted to buy houses, that they were sort of relegated to these neighborhoods, how would you allow that to benefit you when it comes to searching for your family members, genealogically speaking?
Because people are concentrated in one location. So that would give you the idea, you know, and they're labeled, those neighborhoods are labeled. So you would be able to find what businesses, homes, as far as maps, real estate, transactions, renting, you know, city directories, like that. So, and again, it goes on today. I can't tell you how many cases that HUD or around locally that we deal with that still is dealing with redlining. And a lot of times when they're doing this revitalization, they're around the reverse. Instead of labeling like that's a black neighborhood, now there's these prime neighborhoods like downtown area, and they're going in, developers are going in and revitalizing them, and basically the locals or whoever can't afford the new market prices after the revitalization. And I'm not going to say just older people and go into the gentrification type thing, but that you know, needs to move out and let, I'm going to say, young white professionals move in, because that's typically where some of these transformations are going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before we go to break, I'm going to touch on some slides. You guys feel free to comment on the content of these. These are just some kind of hits, you know, of pivotal things, or just things that I wanted to point out to make sure that folks were aware when it comes to conversations that you're having, or maybe some thinking that you're doing around your relatives or ancestors who may have lived in Arizona, California, Nevada, when it comes to their experiences once they got on the ground in those locations. So when we talk about people of color in the West, and we're talking about Arizona, we have to actually bring up a case that took place called Gonzalez versus Shealy. And this was actually a precursor to Brown versus the Board of Education. And in this case, they basically were suing because there were separate schools for Latina or Latino kids in Arizona. And this case established that there could be no more separate but equal in the state of Arizona when it came to children who were from Mexican or Latin descent. And it was written in, you know, the laws and then the practices of the schools in Arizona that there would be segregated schools. And so I just wanted to make sure that I brought this up, because oftentimes when we talk about people of color, we often think that, you know, oh, it was just African Americans. No, everyone that was a person of color was marginalized in these communities. And, you know, when the laws were written and they would say, well, no Chinese or no African Americans or no Black people or Negroes, underneath that, you know, sort of implied but not actually written would be Mexicans, Latinos, Japanese, other folks. And so we've got to consider those things when we're talking about these things. Hitting the ground running in California. If you have not heard of Biddy Mason, head straight to Google right now so you can be gamed up on her case. Biddy Mason was a former slave of a man named Robert Smith. She was born August 15th, 1818 in Georgia, and her former slave owner brought her from Mississippi to California before statehood, and she was supposed to be freed once statehood became law. And her owner did not tell her this and the other slaves that were owned, that he owned. And so in a bid to try to stave off them getting freed, he decided that he was going to take her and the other slaves to Texas to sell them off. And in the process of doing that moving, and this is a story that I really just got illuminated for me, because Biddy was taken out to San Bernardino, which is not far from where I was born and raised. So the fact that there were slaves out there, now I want to go out to San Bernardino and make sure that their story is shared. But anywho, anyone that knows Southern California knows that San Bernardino and Santa Monica are not that close together. They're about 50 miles or so apart. So Biddy's slaveholder took them from San Bernardino out to Santa Monica en route to go to Texas to sell them off. And in the process of doing that, someone thwarted his efforts, tipped them off to a judge in California who essentially freed her and the other folks. And the amazing part of the story is that she became a successful entrepreneur, philanthropist, and a founder of First AME Church in Los Angeles. And so Biddy needs a movie. I don't know why they haven't done one on her, but she needs a movie as far as I'm concerned. She really does. And anybody want to add anything in with regard to Biddy? Because we're getting ready to take it a break in a second.
I think that hopefully she does get a movie, or people start, more people learn that story. But I think it's interesting when you connect folks to institutions like the AME Church and other ones that that a lot of times those are not the figures that we get. If they're connected to Black or institutions that are made up of people of color. Exclusively. That's why I think Underground is such a amazing show to me, because they're showing, the multiracial stuff, but then they're also showing a lot of stuff that was just, with no white people around. I think it's interesting.
The whole founding of Los Angeles too is not it's a story of people of color as well.
Weigh in on that a little bit more, Ellen, because the people in the back, I don't think they're hearing you on that. I think folks need to get real clear on the full name of Los Angeles and the fact that it's abbreviated, right? Yeah. That's one thing a lot of people don't know, is that Los Angeles has got a much longer name.
Right. And I'm also thinking of Pio Pico, who was Afro-Latino, who was the first mayor of Los Angeles and one of the founders of that town. So you have a lot of like kind of different kinds of narratives when you start looking a little more closely at the founding of some places that people might have assumed that it was different.
Absolutely. All right.
Well, also like the Asians too, and I think of California, Northern California, up in your area, the Asians and the developing of the Chinatowns and the things like that, LA as well. And it's interesting, but the prejudice, the redlining, and all of that went on during that. And then again,
San Francisco too, where you had Fillmore in San Francisco.
Yes.
Filipino and African American, different Latino groups, they're all together in that neighborhood. It was like one of the first to get raised so that they could, widen the freeway, put the freeway through there. But these were really vibrant communities and contributed a lot culturally to the cultural life of the city in the 40s.
Can we equate what happened, say, in California the same way we look at New York in the settlement of the Italian and the Asian? Do we see those the same way, different eras, but typically the same way?
Kind of, there are similarities and there are differences also. You also have the lining, you have the segregation, but it gets expressed in different ways. Like I learned.
But culturally, people like to be with people like them.
Well, they do.
Everybody.
But then you find that there are people that it'll just mesh. It'll just become something else. And that was, I think, very true of the Fillmore. And of also Manhattan, when you used to be able to walk and it would be different neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood, whereas now you walk and it's all the same thing. People that can afford to be there.
Who did you see how she snuck a preaching there at the end? She said people who can't afford to be there. Oh boy.
Manhattan, was that the word she said?
Yes,
wasn't that land originally owned by an African American woman? The land in Manhattan?
There were different African American communities in Manhattan, but I don't know.
No, I thought the land was owned.
No, the Indians owned it, sold it for $24.
The Dutch took it over, and then after the Dutch came the English, and
All
What's the
right. Well,
chat room saying?
I was about to say, well, with that, we're actually going to head to a break. So if all the panelists could mute themselves, we're going to head on in for the next 2 minutes, get our water, get our drinks, whatever else we're going to have. And we'll be seeing you back here shortly. Have you taken a DNA test but now want to know more of the stories that are part of your African American family history? Are you a professional genealogist researching for an African American client? Are you familiar with Black resources in one part of the country but not in the other? If any of these apply to you and your research, then you may want to attend MAGI, M-A-A-G-I, the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute, which is a teaching institute where for 3 days in July, you'll have the chance to select one of 4 different tracks devoted exclusively to African American genealogy. For the novice, MAGI can teach you new skills. For the experienced researcher, MAGI will expose you to different resources that you may not be using. Located at the Genealogy Center at the Allen County Library in Fort Wayne, Indiana, MAGI will take place July 11th through 13th, 2017. The MAGI experience brings nationally known speakers together with a small group of participants for 3 intense days of learning, analysis, and growth. MAGI can change what you know and influence how you approach your knowledge of your own family history. Whether you need a foundational course, a writing course, or wish to explore the times before and after the slavery era, or if you simply need help in understanding DNA and what it means, MAGI will teach you how and where to go next, now that you have begun to look at your past. Join the small and intimate group at MAGI, the Teaching Institute. For more information, visit the website at magiinstitute.org.
We're back. Thank you. Thank you for advertising, Maggie. Hello, True. How are you doing over there?
I'm doing good. I'm listening in, doing some stuff in the back. But yeah, I've been enjoying all this about Betty and all the chat in there in the chat room with the.
Can you share some of that chat with us until then? Yes. Can you share some of the chat that's going on, some of the comments until we get Nika back?
I hear Yvette. I see you out there. She's talking about the gentrification of the community, and they're giving different examples of, you know, things that are similar now to what was going on back then. So.
Also, I know Yvette's family, her Mexican family, is from Arizona. She was pointing a lot of that out to us. And I'm not familiar with the Lemon Grove incident with the school district. Is anyone on the panel familiar with that? She mentioned the Lemon Grove incident. I'm not sure.
Was that with the migrant workers in California? Hold on. Lemon Grove?
Because I saw that and I was wondering what that was.
Lemon Grove is in San Diego incident, and it looked like it was Robert Alvarez versus the Board of Trustee of the schools. It was the first successful school desegregation court decision in the United States.
Very interesting. And where was it? California or Arizona? Oh, it was
California.
San Diego. Okay, that's where that's from.
San
Sure.
Diego. Yes.
Oh, Roberto Alvarez.
San Diego.
Okay. Very good. Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
There's a lot to consider here. I've actually got a couple more slides. I know. Don't laugh at me. I had myself on mute.
Oh. I saw you said start talking, so I just start asking.
And I don't know why they had that thing on the cord. It's useless.
It's so useless. Like, these are just in case anybody wanted to know about what headsets we're using, because people might want to know, right? If they want to do this themselves. We have these Microsoft live chat things, and they've got this nice little handy dandy mute thing. And here I was being conscientious, just in case somebody in my house decided they wanted to scream out loud because they didn't want to go to bed, right? And I muted myself, and I forgot that I muted myself. So anywho, moving forward in our presentation, because we have a very meaty Ask Mariah to get to tonight. Y'all are not ready. The panel is not ready because the submitter submitted documents and they are not playing with you all. I just want you all to know that.
So bring it on.
Yes, bring it on, baby. Bring it on. All right. So moving forward, we talked about the Chinese immigration exclusion. This is something we have to talk about when we're talking about California, Arizona, Nevada. Chinese immigrants were instrumental in the development of the West through their work expanding railroads. Despite their success, anti-Chinese sentiment grew and thus spawned the creation of legislation blocking further immigration and mandating segregation. And so if you have ancestors that are Chinese, this is something to consider, as well as Japanese. We talked about the internment camps, the treatment of the Japanese as well. You know, we've got to consider people of color in this region kind of one in terms of the areas that they were, or just the things that they were marginalized against. And just to hit on Nevada, we got an account from a man named Clarence Ray, who was interviewed by the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And he says, during this time, Blacks didn't go downtown and quite a number of whites didn't come over here to the West Side. I've heard people call Las Vegas the, quote, Mississippi of the West, end quote. I think that came from the Black entertainers, because people in the big hotels would hire all the Black entertainers they could get, but they wouldn't let them stay at those hotels. That started them coming to the West Side to stay. Mrs. Shaw took care of a lot of people who stayed here. And then there was a lady by the name of Simpson who built a big house that had 8 or 10 rooms that she rented.
Interesting.
So very interesting.
Yeah, wow. So we've seen several movies, right? I believe Dorothy Danders movie with Halle Berry. They talk about her, you know, the fact that she couldn't get in the pool, right? Or that they drained the pool. Didn't they drain the pool when somebody put their foot in there?
And they burned the sheets.
They burned the sheets, exactly. Despite the fact that, you know, here these people are coming to serve as entertainment, and they can't even stay in the same hotels that they're performing in Las Vegas. And so as you walk that strip, because a lot of people like to go down the strip and go to Las Vegas and gamble and things like that, just remember, as a person of color, there was a time period where you wouldn't be allowed in any of those spaces, even though this is the West. So before we move on to Ask Mariah, is there anything else you all want to add in when it comes to people of color, Arizona, California, and Nevada? Alex.
So one thing that I thought was really important to add in was how you had asked about World War II and how it affects your research in Black families here in the West. I grew up in a part of Sacramento called Rancho Cordova, where there was an Air Force base called Mather Air Force Base. Before that Air Force base was there were virtually, literally hardly any Black families there. So post World War II, this Air Force base brought tons of Black people, especially from Alabama, that area. And then on the contrary, on the northern side of Sacramento, you have McClellan Air Force Base, which brought a bunch of people from Louisiana, a lot of white people as well, but most Black families that are in North Highlands area of Sacramento descend from these soldiers who came out of Louisiana. And my best friends, all of their grandparents pretty much are products of these men and women who fought in that war. further, if you go up Highway 80, you get to Fairfield to
Vallejo, yeah.
all of that is based off of the war that brought these families in. So that initially is one of the biggest pull factors for Black people coming. Besides that, you have like Black Panamanians, so on and so forth, that were brought because of that war and as well. So if you think about those things, the leading industries that were in those areas, you can kind of trace where the money was, where all these people were. Again, those areas were also red lines, or they were given the military housing. So you're going to find these clusters of relatives all in the same area, well into the 2010s. Because I grew up in this area, and pretty much a lot of the people that I grew up with are living in houses that their grandparents bought with their GI Bills, so on and so forth. So I just thought that was important to know.
I almost forgot about that. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it's the same thing in Southern California. If you have family members or folks that migrated to Long Beach, they were usually in the Navy, because that was where the naval base was. Where I grew up was March Air Force Base. That was an Army base. It became a reserve base. So you have an influx of folks that didn't necessarily land in LA or Long Beach, but they ended up in San Bernardino, Riverside area, because they were at March Air Force Base. You've got, we talk about the war industry. We talked on people getting those jobs in those shipyards, where there's shipyards in Oakland, there's shipyards in Richmond. That's why, working with a lot of young people, tracing their genealogy, almost all of those folks had ties back to those folks who came for those jobs. In fact, they would send, matter of fact, I worked at Kaiser. Henry J. Kaiser, who started Kaiser Permanente, which is, they had cars, but what they're known for now is their medical insurance. He would send trains to the South to go and pick people up to get them jobs in the Bay Area to work for him, because he had a big steel business that would provide the steel for the ships that were in World War II. And so if you're not quite sure exactly how your ancestors got there, usually it's, for the most part, it's through those means, although there are, a small number of folks that descend from slaves that were actually brought to California before statehood, and then, either bought their freedom because of the gold they panned, or they were freed because they stayed there after statehood. So there's a number of different ways. And it's just it's a complicated story, but it's a very rich one that you can actually put some amazing flesh on the bones for it. So if we don't have anything else to cover, it's time for Ask Mariah. And what is Ask Mariah? Ask Mariah is our lovely part of the show where you can submit your questions, queries, brick walls, I just want to give up. I stayed up till 3 a.m. pulling my hair out. I'm so tired. I can't read these DNA results. I need y'all to help me. Please, 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 please. I've been trying to get this answer for 20 years. That's when you submit this to us and as a panel, we will work out trying to give you suggestions and helping to solve your genealogy conundrums live on the air. As I always have to mention, I do not provide the documents or the case to the panel beforehand, because they will work it into the midnight hour, burn the oil, and then the next day get up and do the exact same thing. That's why they're laughing, because they know that it's true. So please know that they have not seen any of this beforehand. They have no clue on any of it. And tonight it's a doozy. We have a viewer named Cynthia Johnson who has submitted a lot of information over to us, including documents. She was planning on joining us tonight, but she got into a fender bender and is in urgent care right now. So keep her in your thoughts and your prayers tonight. So just keep in mind that she'll be watching the recording later, but she had planned on joining us. So she's got very good reason not to be in the chat tonight. All right. So for Ask Mariah, we are being asked about David Johnson, who is Cynthia's, I think he's her great-great-grandfather. She's interested in any information about her Johnson line, specifically the parentage of David Johnson of Jeanerette, Louisiana. So we're dealing with Louisiana. Of course, this ties in nicely with our Western people in the West episode, because of the number of people that left Louisiana and migrated to California. So we're dealing with David Johnson of Jeanerette, Louisiana.
Time period.
Here we go. Let me flip to the slide. Y'all are trying to jump on it quick. So findings so far, 1910 census in St. Mary's Parish with his wife, Emma Surf Johnson. She's got oral history that he had a brother named Ernest Johnson. She says that her grandfather remembers going to visit this person. There's also marriage records for the Ernest Johnson that I just referenced, and a Felix Johnson, that note parents being Arthur Johnson and Elizabeth Delahoussaye. So we've got a 1900 and 1910 census in St. Mary's Parish with his wife named Emma Surf Johnson. We've got oral history of a brother named Ernest Johnson from her grandfather that gave her this information. We've also got marriage records for the same Ernest Johnson for Felix Johnson, and both of those folks, their parents are noted as Arthur Johnson and Elizabeth Delahoussaye. I'm not done yet. We've got one more slide. She also has a land record from January 7th, 1937, which mentions the children of David and Johnson and Emma Surf Johnson. And the children are Olga Johnson Harris, Beretha Johnson, Hilton Johnson, Clifford Johnson, and Joseph Johnson. She's also got a U.S. Social Security application index record for Olga Johnson Harris that states that her parents' names are David Johnson and Emma Surf Johnson. And for all the documents that I've referenced, I have them right here available for you guys to be able to see. The land record, it details, it's basically a sale from descendants to or several people who have interest or who've been bequeathed the land based on their ancestry to another party, and it's very detailed. So let me go ahead and share that so you all can see it.
Can you clarify what her question is?
Yes,
She
what
wants
is the
to know.
It seems like she's got a lot of data. So what is she asking specifically about David?
She wants to know who his parents are. She wants help discovering who his parents are.
You have her. Okay, you have her.
Yes, and let me share the land document. Yo, Lord, hold on.
Well, also, did she have a death at all?
No death record. She's looked for that. She's looked for that.
And do we have an idea when he was born? Era?
She should in the
time frame.
1900 census.
1900 census has it. Let me get that information. So, with regard to this 1937 record of Mose Mouton is a cousin of Alex Traps. This is in St. Mary Parish. Are you sure it's the same person, Alex?
Yes, like I just found these people.
Okay, well, you might have your answer here, Cynthia. We're 2 minutes in. You might have your answer. So, so this is a cash deed. This is air property, Miss Bernice. You were asking. That lists several people. Cash deed from Louise Provost King, Alice Surf Bernard, Oscar Surf, Hilton Johnson, Clifford Johnson, Joseph Johnson, Beretha Johnson, Olga Johnson Harris, Ed Provost, Alfred Provost, Hazel Provost Drexler. So we know that some of those names are the children of Emma and David. And it just goes through talking about who's married to who's made, their the age of their majority. It lists that for all of those folks. It talks about the legal land description, how much money was handed down. Now, here's the part for you, Alex. Mose Mouton, full age of majority, husband by first and present marriage to Dorita Martin Mouton, resident of Parish of St. Mary, state of Louisiana. So we're going to move further down and get into the part where it mentions Emma and David, because she has not found a marriage license for them. This is the only information that she has that pretty much, besides the census, that ties them together. And it says Emma Surf Johnson, number 5, we're looking at, wife of Dave Johnson, died intestate 1924. Her husband died in 1925. She left her as her sole and only heirs, 5 children.
Right there.
Yeah, so that's the confirmation there.
So David Johnson died 1925.
Yes.
And
I'd like to know where he got the land from.
So the land itself is this is Emma's family, where this land came from, because the original person, it looks like, who it's got all the Surfs mentioned. It doesn't have any Johnsons mentioned outside of
it's Emma and David's children that are getting the land.
That are getting the land.
Right. But whose land was it before then? So that's a
Well,
question for her. If she hears this, she's got a legal description and
yes.
should be able to track that land back to how David Johnson got the land.
Oh, no, it's there. I'm sorry. I knew it was there. Alphonse Cerf, who married Mary Legnon Cerf in 1872. And Alphonse
So
Cerf
he
and
bought
Mary,
it or got it or
yeah, Alphonse had the land, and then he died, and his wife Mary died, and one of their 6 children was Emma. And then because Emma
okay. So
died,
it's
then it went
okay.
to Emma's children.
So
So
it's Emma's land, not David's.
lots David's, exactly. But this is her only clue that she's had that basically would connect. You know what I mean? There's no marriage record, I don't think she has. So this is what has connected Emma to David. She's doing an exhaustive search. So that's one of the reasons why she provided this. I suggested to her perhaps to maybe even look up more information about this legal land description, this Couteau plantation. Just to see who's associated with that, to see maybe if there are Johnsons or somebody. There's also an estate record that mentions the estate of Alphonse Cerf, maybe seeing if some witnesses, anything she could possibly glean from that. I'm going to bring up the 18 or 1900 census.
One thing that I noticed when I looked,
Okay,
when
you're
I started looking
breaking
these people up, can you hear me?
You can hear you now.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed when I looked these folks up, and I'm assuming that the submitter knows this already, is that I noticed that one of the children mentioned Hilton Lawrence Johnson is listed on Find a Grave, being buried at St. John Baptist Church Cemetery in St. Mary Parish. And I always tell folks, people tend to not stray too far away from their organizational and religious affiliations. And so I would really, advise that if she doesn't already have the information, to dive into the history of this church or other Baptist churches that may have been in that area at that time, to try to get an idea of, where of any Johnsons or serfs or anything that may have been members, deacons or pastors or what have you, that may provide some clues, as well as trying to find out if maybe they actually have extant records of marriages, deaths, funerals, etc. Because you'd be surprised at what some of these old country churches actually have sitting in the basement, in the closet, and in the attics.
True.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
still would let loose of that land, though. I think a key could track that land, because possibly that land was either given to, oh, I'm sorry, it's Emma's land.
It's Emma's land, not David's
The
land.
neighborhood was the Johnsons next to Emma's people, or in the same community.
So
that's where I would sell it.
on this 1900 census, you can see a Legnon, who, of course, that was Emma's family's mother's maiden name, living next door to David and Emma on the 1900 census. David was born approximately. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay.
But
I'm sorry.
I didn't hear what she said.
You didn't hear anything I said?
No, or Angela said something.
She just said she asked me to enlarge it.
Okay, another question. Do we know? Go ahead.
No, I was just saying something else I noticed about this Hilton Johnson. It says here that he died in Houston, Texas, but apparently the body was still buried and interred in St. Mary Parish. So
yes,
that also tells you something, about the possible family ties to that church.
Yeah. What year did he die?
This was
1925 is when David died.
But Hilton is David's son.
Yeah, Hilton died January 16th, 1981.
Well, the reason I asked that is because the Houston death records around that time are kind of detailed. So if we pull that, we might be able to get an exact birthplace for David, and that could narrow it down a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then we also know that David died in 1925, I think is what the estate record is saying.
Yeah.
So we can use another source.
Tallulah close to this area?
No, Tallulah's in North Louisiana.
Shreveport?
No, that's North Louisiana. This is South Louisiana. This is in the South. Yeah, it's the Southwest. Yeah. Let me pull the 1910 up.
So David Johnson, he dies in 1924. I hate, you can't do a search and just put Louisiana because David Johnson is such a common name.
It is.
So maybe wife Emma. I'm just checking.
Is it believed that David Johnson grew up in St. Mary's Parish, or did he grow up in another?
She's got no information. Based on these two census records, it looks like he was born in Louisiana, and so were both of his parents. And based
about
on
what age?
What
birth year?
He
about
was 26 and 19.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. 74.
1874.
And you got him in the 1910 census and the 1900, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
And the 1910 census, they're saying there's a 1879 birth for Louisiana, and he's in St. Mary's. Police Jury Ward 3, St. Mary. It looks like the 1910.
This is 1910.
Okay, so 1879 is birth, and death is 1925.
Hold on.
How old was he when he died? I'm getting my calculator.
Is West Feliciana Parish near there?
Sort of,
yeah.
Okay.
More to the east of that, the northeast of that.
I don't know what he said.
I didn't hear you.
It's towards the northeast of that.
Of St. Mary. Yeah, it's not far. It's not far.
And I'm looking at an 1880 census in West Feliciana. I see a 5-year-old. And
he was 46 years old, guys. That's young.
When? What year? He was 26.
Wait, I did 19. Mine is, what was it, 1879? He was 46 when he died.
Oh, when he died, yeah.
But the earliest.
Yeah, when he died.
1874.
Yeah, the earlier date was 1874. So we're saying between roughly 1874, 1879 as an approximate.
Let me ask a question. Are the names of any of his siblings known?
So I hold on. Let me back up, because that's why I have this document up now. There's at least one of them that is known, and this is based on oral history. There is a brother named Ernest. This is a little hard to read because it's a little bit of a folded up document, but this is a marriage license from 1912 for an Ernest Johnson. This is in St. Mary Parish, that lists his parents as Arthur Johnson and Elizabeth Delahouse. There's also an additional marriage record for Felix Johnson, and she didn't get an actual certificate of that one, that also lists the same parents.
Well, they were Catholic. This is great.
Okay, Nika.
Yes,
look
ma'am.
in the chat. There's a marriage record for a David Johnson getting married in 1888, and the wife is Emma Cooper.
Okay, who's beeping?
I found them.
Okay, where is he at?
Mute Angela.
Where'd you find him?
So I just found
me?
No, can we just have one person talk at one time, please? Thank you. Alex, what do you have to say?
So I found David Johnson in 1880 living with Arthur and Isabella. Knowing Louisiana and knowing this area, Elizabeth sometimes does translate into Isabella. I don't know why, but it does. Or he could have remarried by this time. But I have them in St. Mary Parish, and I can send you guys a link to the record right now in the chat so y'all can all see it. So there's Arthur Johnson, Isabella, and a son named James, a son named David, who was 6 years old, making him born about 1874, and a little brother named Felix. So there's that Felix that we have from
the Felix, there's the Ernest.
Exactly. And then there's David. Is that conclusive? But this is what actually does, oh no, that's not Delahouse. Never mind. I almost got excited. I thought the person next door was a Delahouse, but it's not.
I was going to say, it looks like a Johnson.
Yeah, so there's other Johnsons in the area, which is great. And then we have an age range for the parents, which is also great.
Yeah, which is also great. Let
And
me
then
bring
next
up what
door,
you
they're
found.
right next door to a plantation. So they're listed as labor, so they're most likely farmhands on this plantation, or we can go a page over and try to see if we can find the next plantation owner. That narrows down.
Let me bring it
where
up.
they live.
Okay. So
Also,
this is what Alex just found. He found, here's Arthur Johnson right here, Isabella, which he said which is true, could be transposed to Elizabeth, whatever. James, David, Felix. We've got 3 people here. So this, look, to me, I would say this is a good lead.
I just put their marriage record in the chat box.
Okay. I've got that too. So now
1900.
Yeah, and maybe she mentioned to me, Cynthia mentioned to me that she hasn't been able to find anything for Della House, anything like that. She hasn't been able to find anything, and it might be because they may have noted Isabella, and it should have been Elizabeth, or maybe the names were kind of transposed. But I think these are 2 really good leads. In my opinion, I think this 1880 is a very good lead. What do you all think?
What was on the next page? Are we still on page 41, or did I move it?
No. You're saying on the next page of the census. So we've got this Bodine that lives next door.
Oh, okay, I see it now.
Yeah.
Can you move the page? If you guys look further up the page in they don't have like up to like household 417 and prior.
Yes.
There's the last name Prevost, which is often
is in the that was in the
I've been together pretty close. I need to log into my family tree so I can pull all these people up.
So this is, I would say this is good conclusive proof, because the provosts were mentioned in that land sale that we just looked at. There was a Louise Provost King, Alfred Provost, and a Hazel Provost Drexler that were mentioned in that land sale. Yeah. And this is a white planter named Emilio Provost.
Right.
But before I would accept Isabella as Elizabeth, I would want to see it somewhere else.
Yeah, I would too.
I wouldn't accept it right as being the document, not right.
If you guys notice, Isabella is listed as 23, and there's a 7-year-old child in there. How old would she have had to have been?
16, if that was her child.
That's not.
That's not. Yeah, no, that's not.
Then there's a 3-year age gap between David and Felix. So but
I say she's got a lot to.
Yeah, I would deal a little more and go ahead and pull that marriage record and see if she can actually look at it. The one that I found for David and Emma getting married, because it just might list his parents on the actual record.
Or witness. I did see in that marriage record that there was.
Now let me ask you another question. He died in 1925. I would also check for World War I records and see if he registered or anything.
Okay.
Because he did died at 25. I can look right now.
Wouldn't he be a little old for that though?
No, because there was an old man's draft, and my great grandfather had a draft card, and he was born in 1874.
A lot of World War I. Yeah, no, he'd be fine.
You had to register even if they did not serve.
You're teaching me something there. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, they called it the old man's draft.
They had to register even if they served no time at all.
Exactly, just like you gotta, anyway, yes.
So, question, in that 1880 census, the Johnsons and Delahousa, I'm not sure how to pronounce
Delahousa.
Delahousa, they lived the 2 families were next door neighbors then.
Yeah.
Correct. So, so they didn't go far to go courting or anything. So, no. Right next door.
Can we go back to that marriage record with Felix and Ernest?
Yeah. Let me bring it up. And it doesn't have very much information. It's just it's
Yes,
out of a book.
because I saw other names on there
Okay.
at the bottom.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm excited because these are my people. Not that one, the written one, the original.
Okay.
I'm checking the military right now, but goodness, David Johnson's so common.
It is.
So, did you all, because I had to take a call, did you all find him not him, but find the parents in 1870 as well?
No, we hadn't gotten that far yet.
Okay.
And this is for Alex. I can send this to you, so you don't have to be trying to use this time to try to find your family, because that's not what this is for.
I know I'm not trying to find my family. I'm just trying to help find some clues now. So look, so this is what I did notice on here at the bottom there. If you guys notice, there's towards the bottom. So there's the witnesses.
Yes.
So we have a woman named Florence Johnson. Most likely, or could be, she could be a sister also, or she could be one of the other brothers' wives.
This is very important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I know Bernice would agree.
So let's try to find this Florence somewhere, because Florence, I mean, like if it's a daughter that was that involved with her brothers, maybe she took care of their parents in older age. We might be able to see something after 1880, because so far I can't find Arthur anywhere else. Maybe she has Elizabeth, Isabella, you know, who knows? And then
I
also
agree.
see some other people, the Casimirs. So there's Joseph Casimir, Matilda, Connor, or Sonia maybe. And
yeah,
then,
I'm thinking it could be Florence or Clarence, since this is kind of cut off. Yeah.
Oh no,
it could be
Florence.
Florence.
You look at the line right above that. So there's like two lines above it.
Yeah, it's Florence.
It's Florence.
Okay.
Yeah. She needs to do every name in that document and so wet the heck out of that thing.
Absolutely.
And I would build the timeline, and I had to say it, y'all gonna get tired of it. But in order to keep this stuff track when there's kids being born and stuff, because somewhere there might be a little bit of movement into the next county or something, or parish or whatever. So as far as family wise, I would put all that she has in a timeline and start breaking down those documents with those names and following up on these leads like everybody is coming up with, because we got a death record. We got a death date for him, and we have him and Emma's marriage record. She needs to see if she can't pull and see if there's more than just what Family Search has on there, and see if there's actually a hard record, because hopefully it will give David's parents' names. But the other question is, in those census, in that 1900 census, I would be looking for Mama and Daddy in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I would look for all the Johnsons in the 1900 census. I wouldn't jump to 1880 into that 1900 census and who is in that parish or in that county.
Right. Also, I would go back to the witnesses, because I just found Joseph Cashmere and his whole family, and just start tracking those witnesses to see if those witnesses are also family members.
Right.
Johnson is living 2 pages over from them in 1900, and there's all these provosts and Lanyards or whoever they are living nearby too.
Anything else before we wrap on this one?
I think she got plenty to do. I'd like to hear the result though, because she's got some good leads. I'd like some feedback.
Okay.
You know, to get back so we have an idea, you know, if she found something based on our leads.
All right, and I've messaged all these things to her.
Thank you. I'm not finding anything military yet, but I'm only checking Ancestry.
All right. You guys rock. Way to go. Didn't it help to have documents?
It did.
It did.
I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that. So if you are thinking about, submitting your case to Ask MARIAH, it actually helps us get a lot further, a lot quicker if we do actually have documents that we can refer back to when it comes to your case. So just wanted to make sure that folks knew that and just remembered that when it came to getting everything together. Gotta get my window back. So hopefully she'll be able to find more, and I know that she'll keep me abreast of everything because this is a friend of mine. So just thought I thought it fit in well. So if you are interested in having us work your case just like we did for Cynthia and her David Johnson, who has a common last name, feel free to submit to Ask MARIAH. The link is always at the bottom of or in the description of each and every episode of BlackProGen Live. And, keep an eye out. You might get that email telling you that you are our next case. So moving forward, we don't have very much time left. I just wanted to touch on a bit of current events. Tony submitted this one. She's not here with us tonight, but it's a recent coverage that was in the National Geographic magazine that talks about the Sanborn fire maps. Yes, and so we actually talked about this briefly tonight, or in the conversation about redlining. So let's have a dialogue about these Sanborn maps. If you're in the live chat, just put the link in for the story. Has anyone in here had success using the Sanborn fire maps?
I've used them. Of course, I love maps, and one of the things that I find it just wonderful to do is to really blow it up as much as you can and look at the neighborhood. You can find out the structure. You can find out the material that the house that your ancestor lived in. Was it wood? Was it brick? And one of the reasons it's called a fire.
She went dead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, sorry. It was very, very important to understand in terms of the spreadability of fires. This was an insurance map, and it oftentimes would have an impact on certain decisions that were made based on even the materials that a structure was built out of. And it's very, very useful. I find it just a wonderful thing to just blow up a neighborhood and look and see what's there. There's some amazing detail on those maps, some amazing, minutia, just odd little things that you wouldn't expect to see that are long gone, definitely erased from the surface today, but you're having a chance to really get an idea, especially when you see where some people's, even the entrances to their abode, everyone didn't enter their home from the street. And it's just fascinating to see how things were built and the layout, because those things are long gone in so many communities, especially large cities, but even smaller cities too.
So where's the best repository for these that you found online? Of course, we can talk about.
Actually, I found some on ProQuest, but
that's what I was gonna say. Because like you gotta have your old library card. Like,
gotta have your card, right? There are probably other places that people access them. I'm not sure what people use, but
the Library of Congress, I think.
Library of Congress, perhaps. Yeah.
Anyone else have any success stories? Wanda Looney's in the chat room. She says she found some poorhouse records from these Sanborn maps. So I would say, don't rule out, even if your family comes from a rural location or a place that seems like it would be rural, don't rule out the fact that they may have a map available, and that, just looking through it, just to see, especially when it comes to structures, as you just mentioned, Miss Angela, that may not exist anymore.
Absolutely.
Also for street names that have changed.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
And, one of the things I love about New Orleans is the New Orleans Public Library has a website or a page on their website, or several pages actually, that talks about the evolution of street names in New Orleans. So you can actually go and look at the street name that it is now and see what it was before that and before that and before that, which is a great help, because if you're looking at older records, someone dies on Durgenaw and you're like, okay, well, what was Durgenaw before, this time period or whatever? You can actually go and look that up. I wish every public library had that, be able to track that information. But anywho, anything else you guys want to weigh in on before we wrap things up tonight?
I was just looking at the chat. I don't know if you all had mentioned it when I was out. I was looking, I think True made a comment in the chat about wondering what the Green Book, the Negro Motorist Green Book, had for places out west. Well, you know what? I like to use one resource and use it as a tool to go back to another, because I have found, for example, places in my hometown that were in the Green Book that have been there 90 years or so. And my next question was, wow, did that house exist? And can I find it on the Sanborn map? And Green Books, to me, are not just little novelties. To me, I consider that a wonderful tool. I find it a tool to be able to look and get some history of your community. If there were X amount of quote unquote tourist homes, which were rooms where people had an extra room where you could sleep and spend the night. But you know what? Why not map those places? Go on Google and put a pin in a map and start to tell that long forgotten, decades since forgotten story of your community, of your neighborhood. I'm amazed to see the home of someone who died about 10 or 15 years ago, and this was his childhood home, and this house was a tourist home in the Green Book. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't think he knew that. And just remarkable history. And I think it's a wonderful tool and a way for us to take a look at a whole lot of things business-wise that don't exist, especially once the interstates came in. Half of those businesses are gone. Those interstates went right through the commercial district in Black communities in cities. So.
Yeah, and Ellen, go ahead.
Just a nice span of time from 1936 to 66. When those
Absolutely.
And we really should consider it a national city directory.
Yes,
I mean that's basically what that's essentially what it is, and it's Airbnb before Airbnb.
Well, because especially there are so many that are available. The various editions are now online, and you can look at all of them. So
yeah.
Absolutely. And Shelley, last point you were going to make, which is absolutely correct.
Yeah, we didn't mention anything when we were talking about California, Arizona, and Nevada about any of the benevolent societies or things in movement to the West or starting up chapters. And that's also another place we might find people of color possibly following the faith of people or some organized groups or something that went out west also. So don't forget to check that out as well.
Yeah. I was going to say too, Bernice also just mentioned, this is exactly right too. We're talking about Native American research or Native American groups that were in all these locations. There are different various roles, things that you can look up for that. And with regard to migrations, we talked about, I know I was going to say that would be tune into Angela's webinar on that.
Session on that today.
Yeah, that's why she had to get her swig of water. The other thing I was going to say too is we talked about benevolent societies. We talked about the other thing is you can also sometimes recreate communities based on cemeteries out in the West. So some of the things that I think of Inglewood Cemetery. That's a huge African-American cemetery that's right by the Great Western Forum, which is where the Lakers used to play. That's a very prominent cemetery, and you can kind of retrace communities based on where plots were bought.
Greenwood Cemetery in Phoenix. Half of Arkansas is buried right there. It's amazing.
The labor unions, we didn't talk about that. Bernice just brought that up with regard to the Pullman Porters Union, stuff like that, especially when you've got historic places like in Oakland, the 16th Street station. That's where a lot of people landed when they first got into that area, and that 7th Street in Oakland, Harlem of the West. So there are a lot of performers there. Got to plug the African American Genealogical Society of Northern California with regard to, there's a huge obituary project that we digitized where there's a woman named Esther who owned a bar called Esther's Orbit Room, and she used to keep obituaries from all the people that used to visit there, and it was thousands of them. I'm talking like 5,000 obituaries where they were digitized and they're made searchable on AgNic's website. And it's not just, these are people who died in California, but they were from other places. So don't forget your genealogy societies. You got California Genealogical Society, CAGS, California African American Genealogical Society. You've got OGS chapters. I know there's one in like Fresno. Look up those societies because most of those folks, their family members were transplants to these areas. So they're researching the South. Most of the time they're researching the South. So we forgot about that. Churches. Oh gosh, we can go ad nauseum. Funeral homes. We were very clannish when it came to funeral homes and mortuaries, right? We went to the same places. Fouchés in Oakland. The Fouchés were from New Orleans. So it's one of the oldest funeral homes in Oakland. And those folks were, yeah, I was gonna say. So there's 1,000,001 different records. We can go on and on about this all night. Yes, jail in prison. That she brought
in the mental institution based on them check marks on that census.
Yes, ma'am. DDD. Get your DDD on.
Ancestry.com does have a California prisoners and convicts record, and they go like they have juveniles and their picture. So my great grandfather is in one.
Okay, but see, but what you don't know is that you can also write to the state of California for San Quentin records as well, because I know somebody who's still living who's wrote for their parents' record of San Quentin. And they provided it. They had the mugshot, everything. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. They sure did. Yes, buddy. All right. So, oh my gosh, something else. Lord, I thought right when I was about to wrap. The state of California has a database for insurance that was taken out on slaves that is searchable.
Wonderful.
Totally forgot about that. I want to say it's with the Secretary of State, but if somebody took out an insurance policy on a slave and had something to do with California, they have that searchable database. So don't,
So the slave did not have to be enslaved in California.
No.
Correct. So that migration of those Confederates that went west that I talked about earlier, there's a possibility that they might have put insurance on their slaves, especially when they were going in the area and they had some resistance. I had put that link in there on that from the Park Service when they talked about California's role in the Civil War, in the gold rush. A lot of the Southern slaveholders took them and them slaves and headed west for the gold rush.
Yes. So based on this, insurance policies from the slavery era have been discovered in the archives of several insurance companies, documenting insurance coverage for slaveholders for damage to or death of their slaves issued by a predecessor insurance firm. These documents provide the first evidence of ill-gotten profits from slavery, which profits in part capitalized insurers whose successors remain in existence today. And so it's New York Life canceled policies. You can search, there's a report for that policy document, slave names, slaveholder names, and there's slave era report. And this is all thanks to Governor Gray Davis in the state of California. And then there's also ways that you can get copies of the insurance actual documents. And they're held at the libraries at UC Berkeley, UC Davis, UCLA, UC San Diego, Santa Barbara, and Santa Cruz. Wow. So if you're in the chat area, I included the link to that. I don't know how I totally forgot to mention that slave era registry. And California was actually one of the first states to do that, to actually admit, because this was done in 2000. This has been online for 17 years, or this has been in the works for 17 years. So, and the statute, awesome. Yeah, it's pretty stinking awesome. So I hope somebody finds something in there.
But I think there's other states as well. You're making a great point. You got to check all these states that you're researching to see if the insurance databases or registries are there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so based on the statutes, it says it says the commissioner shall request and obtain information from insurers licensed and doing business in this state regarding any records of slaveholder insurance policies issued by any predecessor corporation. So if they're operating in California and they insured slaves, they have to divulge this information.
This is amazing. I'm looking at the database while you're talking, and I'm looking at the places where the slaveholder was. They just had some business out west. But I'm
Yes.
looking at Georgia, Savannah, Augusta, Spotsylvania,
Yeah.
Virginia, Charleston, South Carolina, Frankfort, Kentucky. Okay, true. Scott County, Kentucky, Henderson County, Kentucky. Wow, this is totally amazing. Louisville, absolutely amazing. Fayette, Natchez, Mississippi, multiple
Mhm.
states where the enslaved lived and the name of the slave.
Yes. Yes.
Chesterfield County, Virginia. My gosh, Virginia's all over this place.
Yes.
This is excellent.
Yeah, the commissioner shall obtain the names of any slaveholders or slaves described in those insurance records and shall make the information available to the public and the legislature. Each insurer licensed in doing business in this state shall research and report to the commissioner with respect to any records with the insurer within the insurer's possession or knowledge relating to insurance policies issued to slaveholders that provided coverage for damage or death to their slaves. And then the last piece is descendants of slaves whose ancestors were defined as private property, dehumanized, divided from their families, forced to perform labor without appropriate compensation or benefits, and whose ancestors' owners were compensated for damages by insurers are entitled to full disclosure.
Wow.
This is a
I
part
just
of the law.
put a link in there from genealogytrails.com, and they did a policies registry, and the states that Angela just read off, there's lists with slaveholder names, the county, the slavehold state, the slave name, the slave county parish,
Amazing.
and the policy dates and what age the slave was and their job, the slave job or the skill. I just put
It
that
sounds like
link.
we need to do a whole show on just insurance policies. That's
It
what
sounds
this
like it. Because this is interesting, even though it's kind of limited. Yeah, you know, as far as how many,
It's
but
still a
this
resource.
genealogytrails.com, because I'm looking here in the Virginia block and
Midlothian
familiar
coal and
names.
mining. Amazing.
Yeah. So I would say if you're watching tonight and you think that we should cover these insurance policies, maybe even take up a case where we research people, maybe to try to research people into emancipation, you know, let us know. Make sure you to tweet us, all that sort of stuff, to let us know that you're interested in that. Like I said, I didn't realize I didn't even talk about it, but it's something that definitely needs to be talked about. So moving forward, since we're going to close down, our 30th episode is coming up on Tuesday, April 4th. We're going to be talking about rebellion and resistance, people of color, and the U.S. military. Will we show up dressed in our military garb? Will we have props? Will people take on accents? I don't know. We don't know. We're going to be in rare form for our 30th episode. So be sure to tune in 6 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. on Tuesday, April 4th for our next episode, which is people of color in the military. People of color have been part of every major battle the United States has participated in, regardless of their station in life after they return home from battle. Learn about their involvement and how you can find your own ancestors among the names of our honored veterans. And also, we've got to don't forget about. We've got other programming that comes on Thursday, March 23rd. Bernice is doing her salute to Women's History Month, care of the Florida parishes. And she's going to be talking to Antoinette Harrell and several other folks about the lovely area called the Florida parishes in Louisiana that I'm currently waiting in a swamp down there trying to make my way through DNA. Right now. Shout out to Point Coupee, shout out to St. Mary, shout out to Tangipahoa Parish, that's Livingston. We could just keep going all down the line. She'll be talking about all those. That's a great tie-in to what we discussed tonight because people from those parishes immigrated in heavy numbers to California, Nevada, and Arizona. We've got the next episode or next podcast for the African Roots podcast from Angela Walton Braji set to be released Friday, March 24th. 2017. Also, we've got the Prince Hall Think Tank, which is hosted by our own James Morgan III, Sunday, March 26th at 8:30 Eastern. They're going to be talking about Prince Hall masonry and the Sunshine State, aka Florida.
If I can, Nika,
yes.
This is actually our 20th episode for the Prince Hall Think Tank, but this is our first episode in our mini-series where we're going to be highlighting the history of African-American fraternal organizations in various states. So we're starting off in Florida, and you never know what other states will be coming next.
That's
and in what order.
Cool.
Yes, sir.
And to whet your appetite a little bit, there's a reason why that sign is on the back of that flyer. And if you don't watch it, you're not going to find out why.
Rosewood.
Rosewood. That's what he has said. That's what he has said. All right. So don't forget to tune in to Bernice Thursday, March 23rd, 6 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. She'll be talking about Women's History Month community research in Louisiana, Florida parishes. Got the African Roots podcast on Friday, March 24th from Angela Walton Raji. And then we've got the Sunday, gosh, just like a boom, boom, boom with all these things. The trifecta. Sunday, March 26th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Prince Hall Think Tank, talking about Prince Hall masonry in the Sunshine State. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lowdown by BlackProGen. Be sure to get it in your inbox. Anything we produce, let's say you miss Bernice's show, the minute it gets published, it'll come directly to your inbox. You'll get a ping. The minute that Angela puts out her podcast, you'll get a ping when that comes in. And anything else we produce in regard to radio shows, blogs, all that sort of thing. Also, don't forget, if you have some comments that you want to weigh in, maybe we forgot about something when it comes to California, Arizona, Nevada, or people of color in those regions, be sure to tweet us at BlackProGen, hashtag your comment, BlackProGen as well. And that is it for me, unless anybody else has any other announcements.
Still room to register in track 4 at Maggie and track 1 at Maggie.
There is. We had a 2-minute Maggie commercial, so everybody
I
heard
got a
about
new
Maggie.
appointment.
That's
I got
right.
appointed by the governor.
He sure did. Congratulations for
I'm on the
Shelley.
Library of Virginia board.
Yes, yes. So make sure you have your military garb, your uniform. Maybe you change your profile picture to a military family member that you had in the military for our 30th episode. Just maybe you wear your red, white, and blue. Maybe we have flags. I don't know. We're going to do something amazing for the 30th episode. It's going to be pretty live. So be sure you join us on Tuesday, April 4th. I am Nika Smith. Thank you so much for joining us for BlackProGen Live. We will see you on April 4th. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.